Kirby and the Forgotten Land will be the pink puffball's first fully 3D title. Sure, Kirby and the Crystal Shards was a sort of 2.5D, and several Kirby games have had 3D overworld maps, but none have been fully placed into a 3D space. It's sort of crazy to think about just how long Kirby has stuck to exclusively 2D titles when all of his other platforming companions have mostly made the jump over decades ago. That means that there is a lot riding on this game for the future of the Kirby franchise. While the game isn't out yet, a demo has been released featuring 3 of the game's levels, which means we're going to get to see a little glimpse into what the full game holds. Welcome to episode 6 of Level by Level. Much like this is the Kirby series' first 3D title, this is my first level by level not based on a Mario game. Now, as I said, yes, the game hasn't been released yet, however, I'm going to be making this video with a mindset that it'll still be relevant post-launch, as I'm assuming that these 3 levels won't change all too much upon release. For each of the 3, we'll talk about their designs as a level, how well they introduce Kirby into a 3D space, and some of the other things like aesthetics, copy abilities, the brand new Mouthful mode, and so on. This will also be mixed with my first impressions of the game as well. All of this footage will be taken from my first playthrough of the demo. But without much more delay, make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoy. At 100k, I'll rank every moon in Mario Odyssey, but let's jump right into the first level, Point of Arrival. So right off the bat, we're treated to a little cutscene to help set up the story, which makes sense of course. It'd probably be harder to find a game without a cutscene at the start. Well, actually wait, first off we're given 2 difficulty options, Wild and Spring Breeze mode. The Kirby franchise has always been known as sort of an easy platformer series. Now that's not a bad thing of course, video games should be for everyone, but some sort of balance needs to be found in order to keep more experienced players invested. This difficulty selection is the first of many ways this demo allows for more difficult ways to play. Wild mode will also reward the player with more star coins. No, not those, these star coins at the end of the level, so there's incentive for the player to play through each level in that difficulty. But that's enough about the game's difficulty balancing for now, let's get back to that cutscene. There's 2 things I want to say about it. One, the animation is incredibly well done, the visuals on this game for the most part are incredible. But the second thing is my first criticism. Now it's literally just a nitpick and nothing that important, but I kind of wish there was a bit more noise than just the music here. Like it felt kind of empty to me without Kirby making any noise, like take a listen again. Again, certainly not that big of a deal, and this seems like something that could easily be changed when the game launches. But now we can get into the level itself, and just from the opening spot, we can see how well they laid this out. The camera points Kirby to the opening in the woods, and from the beach, that's really the only way to go. This acts as a good way to point the player in the right direction. As I've said, this is Kirby's first 3D game, so making sure the player knows where to go is pretty smart. This opening also gave me a clear impression of how this game would be, mostly linear. Take Mario 64's introduction. There's a clear spot that the player can go, but it's much more open, allowing the player to explore the castle grounds. That fits there as that game is more exploration based, whereas Kirby fits more in line with, say, Mario 3D World with a set end goal for each of those stages. However, while the path is pretty obviously laid out in front of you, there are still a few things you can do on the beach. There are a few rocks to kick around and even a crab that'll give you a coin if you go near it. This was just one small example to show that yes, you should absolutely explore in this game as there may be hidden rewards in every small crevice. There's an even better example of this later on in this level, but we'll get to that in a bit. As someone whose favorite part of 3D games is exploration, I was more than pleased to see them lean into this a bit. Oh yeah, it's another small thing, but I really like the little objects that you can kick around like the shells, rocks, and later on some cans. They make this world feel more alive and full of content, even if they aren't much more than something to kick around to maybe get a coin. Odyssey had stuff like this, and I always had fun going out of my way to throw Cappy at them, especially in Luncheon Kingdom because you could cook them as well. From there, you can actually play the level like a normal person, where we get a simple jumping tutorial. It gives directions in the corner for any confused players and even rewards you with some coins, pretty standard first level stuff. One thing I did like about this though is immediately after there's a rock with a glowing spot on top of it, so for any observant player you can use the new jumping ability you just learned to get 3 extra coins, which just reinforces the combination of exploration and linearity this game is shooting for. Then comes the inhale tutorial. I really like how they used a block instead of an enemy so that there's no risk of death for failing to inhale. This also doubles as a spit tutorial, having an extra block on the other side that you can hit for some bonus coins. This was an extra smart decision as it helps build up to the first enemy encounter. Now there are some actual stakes. Not that much, but hey, it's something. Since the player was conditioned that inhaling and spitting something out at a big block can break it, and since our first enemy was placed right in front of said block, it helps show the player that the inhale ability will be the main way to defeat enemies. You even get rewarded with a cherry if you're able to apply what you learned. From there, we get easily the best part of the level. While the first level should certainly help the player learn the controls, it should also sell the player on the game. First impressions are so important as it's what's going to keep the player invested for the rest of the game. So how does Kirby and the Forgotten Land do that? Well, it's by going from a dark, gloomy tutorial area to the bright main area. When I first played through this part, I got serious Steam Gardens vibes from Mario Odyssey, and that's my favorite level in my favorite game, so that's some pretty high praise. I mean, they both go from a dark, quiet area before opening up to a brighter area that has an entirely separate yet still cohesive look from where you just were. Both of these levels also use music in a fantastic way as well. Both the theme used in this level and Steam Gardens really helps sell the transition and magic of the new area you just entered. Now, I don't think this song is as good as Steam Gardens, of course, but it's still really solid. The camera work here to show the scale of the Forgotten Land as well also makes this one of the most standout moments in the demo. If the full game manages to top this, I'll be quite surprised. Now realistically, that is the best part of this level. However, we now get to the part of this level that truly sold me on this game. It's nothing major, and honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if most people just don't care about this at all, but for me, it was all I needed to know that I'm going to really enjoy this title. This starts off with the copy ability tutorial. Obviously, we already learned that inhaling enemies is the way to go, and even if we didn't, the box in the corner will show up once again to tell us. Sword being the first copy ability is, in my opinion, definitely the best choice. A sword is a concept anyone can understand. That's why there's like 4 billion sword users in Smash Bros. The sword attacks are also tied to the inhale button, making it pretty easy to use. Now you could go forward to test out the ability on some enemies, or you could do what I did and go towards this little patch of grass placed suspiciously close to the copy ability. Attempting to cut it with the sword will not only cut down the grass, but reward the player with a coin, showing that not only can copy abilities interact with the environment, not just enemies, but that secrets may be hidden using them as well. Now during my playthrough, that got me thinking. There were bits of grass during the first enemy encounter. I wonder what will happen if I try to chop these down. So off I went, backtracking past the giant building and back into the small woods. Honestly, I wasn't expecting much at all, but upon cutting one of the patches of grass, I was rewarded with a giant blue star coin worth 50 of them. This right here is what made me realize just how well thought out this game is going to be. There was absolutely no reason for them to think a player would just decide to go backwards, and yet my exploration was rewarded with something actually worth going back for. While I do like linear 3D platformers, I've always been much more of a fan of the exploration type ones like Odyssey and 64, however this right here made me realize that this game will give me plenty of that exploring that I love out of games like these. Seeing that blue coin pop out is what sold me on this game. I've been avoiding what anyone else has said, so I don't know if finding this blue coin is a common occurrence or what, but this moment felt truly special to me. But anyways, let's get back into the main level because there's still a lot to talk about. After the copy ability testing section that lets us try out the sword on a few enemies, we get a further jumping tutorial. This time though, the ledge is significantly higher. This not only forces us to use Kirby's float ability, but also use it to its max so that we get an idea of just how high Kirby is able to go up. I also like how there's an optional ledge that float can be used to reach in order to get some food to heal after possibly getting hurt by the enemies. Afterwards, we get our second copy ability of the level. I think it was pretty smart to have at least 2 in the first level to show that there are more than just one ability Kirby can use. I like how this area's layout is much different than the swords area from earlier. Instead of being filled with enemies and platforms, this area places the enemies near breakable blocks, showing that the bombs can be used to destroy these blocks. Since you also get the ability on a small hill, you'll get to also see how the bomb reacts to physics as well. From there, you can go through 2 different bridges with enemies and even do a little balling. I also like how there's another chance to use the bombs on a slope right before going into the next section. It's a lot of fun to hit this guy. Speaking of that next section, we finally get introduced to what seems to be the game's main gimmick, the Mouthful mode. The first one is shown off to us in a little cutscene. One thing that surprised me is that we actually get to keep our copy ability during and after Mouthful mode. You can't use it while you're in it, but you can keep the little hat on, which is nice. I think this will encourage a lot of experimentation with Mouthful mode later down the line, as you won't have to worry about losing your copy ability. Though this does actually bring up a bit of a continuity error. See, I clearly have the bomb ability before and after the cutscene, but during it, no hat can be seen. Wow, what a terrible video game. Hope someone got fired for that one. But anyways, the car is so much fun to control. I also appreciate having this little area to get used to controlling it. Not only does it help us with that, but it's also filled with a ton of things to ram into and knock over with the car, which was pretty fun. In order to exit this area, the player is required to ram down the wall. A line of coins point the player in the right direction, and requiring them to do this ensures that the player knows that the car can actually break things before moving on. From there, you get a little bit more time to use the car in an actually populated area. I like how there's a few coins hidden between this wall here, and I also like how this has a bit of a split path. You can either just go to the side and run straight to the end, or you can go up these little hills and break a few blocks to get some bonus coins. It's nothing much, but having an easy and slightly more difficult path is something I always enjoy. From there, we are sadly forced to part ways with our car and move on to the end of the level, which involves a fight against several different enemies. Doing this with the bomb ability was a ton of fun, since chucking the bombs right where they're going to spawn is pretty entertaining. After defeating them, that brings us to the end of our level. Well, actually, I just learned at this part that Kirby can taunt using the D-pad, so after about a minute of messing around with that, we could finally end the level. Overall, this is a fantastic first level for not only Kirby and the Forgotten Land, but as a first mainline 3D Kirby level as a whole. It succeeded at not only being a tutorial, but perfectly selling the game as well, showcasing a lot of its core mechanics in a simple and easy to understand way. Now that would generally be the end of the video, however I did want to cover our other 2 levels in the demo as well, so let's jump right into our second level, Downtown Grassland. Now I do want to mention that this may not be the actual second level in the final game. Just because this is a demo doesn't necessarily mean the 3 levels featured here are the first 3 in the game. In fact, I'm fairly convinced the boss fight level isn't the third one, but we'll get to that when we get there. Right away, downtown Grassland has a lot more content in it than the first level. While that was sort of meant to be an introduction, this is one of the main levels. Think of it how like Cap Kingdom is Mario Odyssey's first kingdom, but Cascade is its first true level. Even though you can go back to Cap later on, but you get what I mean. This level begins with an open area to just run around and collect a few coins. The first thing is this red tulip clearly placed on this stump. Most players are likely to run over it out of curiosity, and then when they touch it, they get rewarded with 2 things. One is a red coin worth 10 coins, but the other thing is a notification in the corner. This lets the player know that there are 4 other tulips in this level, but not only that, it lets the player know that each level is going to have separate missions in it. I really like this idea as it encourages exploration without making it required. It's a perfect way to add some more content for more experienced players while leaving the main game easy for new players to beat. Now jumping ahead a bit, these 5 tulips are hidden pretty well throughout the level. Some are more obvious than others, but one took me so long to find. I'm not kidding, I spent like a good hour looking for it. But on the plus side, I found another giant blue coin on top of this roof. Again, rewarding bizarre exploration. Anyways, back to the main level. This level features the introduction of the cutter ability, and to be honest, yeah, I don't like using this. The cutter feels way too weak. The sword and bombs were a lot of fun, but I just couldn't get behind this one. I do like how there's a little platform to try and time the cutter toss to hit this enemy, but yeah, nothing too special about this thing. A switch is also introduced for the first time, and while you can activate it by just jumping on it, since we just got the cutter, the player may try to use the cutter ability to hit the switch. The enemy blocking the path will also convince the player to throw the cutter in the switch's direction. The player then may also test getting this piece of cake with the cutter as well, which actually works, meaning that they won't have to go into here to actually get the slice. Man, it sure is a good thing that nothing is hidden there that someone might miss due to them using the cutter to grab the cake. It'd be a shame if they spent hours looking for a secret that was placed right at the start. I mean, that'd just be silly. Anyway, we then get to our second Mouthful ability, the vending machine. This just acts as a way to shoot out soda, but like the bomb showcase section, this is placed alongside a lot of breakable crates and enemies, showing that the soda is able to destroy things. It's even able to destroy these metal crates as well, which the player is able to learn when attempting to shoot the enemy standing on top of them just like I did. We then get another split path like we did with the car section earlier, though this time instead of rewarding the player with coins, you get one of the collectible figurines hidden within the level and one of the achievements. After that, we are once again forced to get rid of our Mouthful ability, though don't think I didn't at least try to cheese the level. We then need to fight a big enemy before being able to move on to the next segment. This second section does bring me to the sort of first major criticism of the level, sadly. So as I implied, I missed a red tulip at the start of the level, which meant I had to go back in order to 100% this. Unfortunately, after using this warp star here, there's no going back to the first segment. This made exploring for the tulip more worrisome, as I had to be really sure if I wanted to move on to the next segment. I know that some other linear titles make it to where the player isn't able to go back, but that doesn't mean I really like it. They could have easily left the warp star here, but instead, we're stuck. But that's only one criticism, so let's move on. We're finally able to get rid of the cringe cutter ability and revert back to bomb. This section acts as a way to showcase how the player can use the bomb to further interact with the environment. It lets the player break these crates to clear a path for themselves, as it would move the cannons below ground level. Oh yeah, one dumb thing. Not really a big deal, but the cannons themselves having hitboxes is kinda stupid. This brings us to our third Mouthful ability, that one being Cone. This lets us jump up and slam down into the ground with our point, allowing us to break certain things like these crates placed directly next to them, obviously meant to clue the player in on this fact. If the player didn't pick that up, then there's also another enemy placed on top of a metal crate that the player would likely want to kill, leading to this discovery. Immediately after, there's a crack in the floor. The player has already been primed to try and break cracked objects ever since the car introduction, so it's likely that the player would try to break this and discover a few hidden coins inside. One other thing I like about the Cone tutorial is this section with the 3 enemies. There's a flower in the direct center of all of them, so there's a chance that a player may want to land on top of that, and upon doing so, they realize that the Cone Slam is actually able to hit enemies a bit farther away from its point. From there, there's another crack that lets us dodge a few more cannons, and then another split path. We're able to see another crack on top of this pipe. After hitting the pipe, not only do we gain access to the second path, we complete another one of the level's missions, which is to ride it up here. Jumping off the balcony, we can even get another figurine by driving through this pile of crates. But with that, we then have to leave behind our cone and get to a mini-boss. This gives us an option between either using the bomb or the cutter ability, which I really like, because trust me, I really don't want to use the cringe cutter for longer than I have to. This starts out with just some simple enemies before getting into the mini-boss Wild Edge. I like this because it shows off that the boss is going to be damaged in the same way normal enemies are. Upon completion of the fight, we have to free one of the Waddle Dees, introducing us to another one of the level's challenges to find and save all 3 Waddle Dees. The third section of this level is easily the most open, with pretty much 3 main areas to go to. The first one on the far right introduces us to the final Mouthful ability of the demo. It's the least in depth of the 4 since it's only used to reveal a hidden Waddle Dee, but that doesn't mean it's bad. It's sort of like the Mario letter captures in Mario Odyssey or other sort of one-off captures. The second section leads us to the third and final Waddle Dee. In order to defeat the enemy in the center, it's obvious that you need a cone due to the crack in its back. However, there doesn't appear to be a cone anywhere. Upon climbing up the nearby building, you can see that the cone is caught up in some vines that you need to cut down. The ability to cut the vine isn't made entirely obvious, but placing the sword copy ability next to the vine acts as a helpful hint that the sword would be able to cut it down. Plus, if you use your brain for like 2 seconds, you could probably guess that. Our final section brings us to the end of the level with a small climb up a tall building. At the top, we reach another enemy similar to the one we just fought, though this time much bigger. We have to do our best to try and avoid its attacks by going under the ground. The attacks and hiding spots are placed at absolute perfect distances from each other, as just by running you're more than likely going to see the destructive capabilities of his bite on this rubble and his ability to bite down on this pipe. That gives the player the idea to have him chomp down on the pipe with the patch on it, which allows them to collect their final figurine and complete the level. So overall, much like Point of Arrival, Downtown Grassland is a great showcase of what the game will be like. I don't think it's quite as perfectly crafted as the first level, but there is a high amount of content here that would make anyone satisfied playing through it. Again, really my only issue is not being able to go back to previous sections, and I guess the cutter ability, but other than that, this was another fantastic level. That leaves us with one more level from the demo to talk about, the Brawl at the Mall. Unlike the other two, this level is pretty much exclusively just a boss fight. It starts you off in this really neat looking mall area, however that does bring us to my first criticism. I really like the idea of exploring this mall for a level, but spoiler alert, we're only in here for about a minute. Now there very well could be a mall level in the final game, heck this may actually just be a small part of a larger level, but it'd be incredibly disappointing if we weren't able to explore a setting like this in at least one other level. This also brings up an issue that I have with not only this level, but all 3 levels in the demo, and that is invisible walls. Invisible walls are some of, if not my absolute most hated thing in video games. All they do is prohibit the player from making progress or just having fun in general. There's never been a time where I've appreciated an invisible wall. At best, I understand its placement, but most of the time, they're just really annoying. Like, why show off this area if I can't go over and explore it? At that point, you might as well just put up a normal wall. But one invisible wall placement that honestly has me a slight bit scared for the game is this one right here, blocking the player from jumping from this rail to the other. Now, it may seem silly to be annoyed at something like this. I mean, I could just walk around, but consider that there's pretty much no reason at all for this to be here. All this does is limit the player to playing the exact way the developers wanted. Let's take a look at Mario Odyssey. One of the reasons it's one of my favorite games ever made is because it almost entirely lacks invisible walls. Like, you would really have to be looking for them to find it. Since there's really nothing to block Mario's way, so many different trick jumps are possible to get around the levels faster or in just more fun ways. I mean, take the impossible jump in New Donk City. I do this pretty much every time I visit the level because it's just so much fun. They very well could have placed an invisible wall here, ruining this jump, but they didn't. But then you have this level in Kirby and the Forgotten Land, which has an invisible wall to block off one of the most simple jumps of all time. This doesn't bode well for there being many interesting jumps or ways to get around levels in the final game, if even something simple as this isn't allowed. Now, I could very well be wrong about this, and I hope I am, but it's just a concern that I did feel I should mention in this video. But okay, let's get back into the actual content here. Before we get to the boss, we have the option to pick between 3 different abilities: sword, bomb, and ice? You see, this is why I don't think the Brawl at the Mall is the actual 3rd level, as there's absolutely no introduction to how the ice copy ability works, unlike how each of the other copy abilities and Mouthful abilities have had at least small tutorials beforehand. After choosing our ability, or not choosing one if you're a maniac, the funny monkey grabs you through the window, which I think is a pretty cool transition, and we get to the boss fight itself. I mean, it's okay. Like, there's not really much to say about it. Each of its attacks have obvious windups to make it clear when he's going to attack, which is good for an early game boss. His spinning attack also reminds me of Donkey Kong Uppy in Smash Bros. The boss is pretty easy due to his attacks being super slow, but again, this is likely a boss fight incredibly early into the game, so that's understandable. And that brings us to the end of the demo. Overall, I think this was a fantastic showcase of what the game is going to offer us on the 25th. While I do have a few minor problems, I think this game is going to be a blast to play through, and I for one can't wait to play it and explore every single hidden detail in this game. As for the level by level tier list, I'm going to be placing Point of Arrival in S tier for being an absolute perfect introduction to not only Kirby and the Forgotten Land, but Kirby in 3D as a whole. Downtown Grassland is going to get a B. It's certainly a solid level, though there are a few problems with it that do keep me from wanting to put it in A tier. The Brawl at the Mall will take C tier. The aesthetic is really good, though the content is certainly a bit lacking. Always remember that the level placings between episodes may change when my opinions do, but I think these are good spots for them as of right now. But anyways, that's it for Level by Level Episode 6. Are you all not able to touch grass because the outdoors is blocked by an invisible wall? Let me know in the comments. I'm incredibly excited to try this game out, and if this video performs well, I'll try to make a few videos on it post-launch. I've always been a decent fan of the series, but I think this is the first game to have me really hyped for it. But anyways, drive-ons for Smash, and I'll see you guys next time.